This spring we took you on a farm tour and took you all around all the different fields, showed you what was happening, and I wanted to do a quick update, take you through the same fields so you can see what's happening 2 months after that first spring tour. The roses have all started blooming. Many of them are finishing up their first flush now, so it's about the second week in June, and we're kind of still seeing some of them bloom out for the first time, but here in the next week we'll be more or less done with that first flush. We're pruning everything back, we're going back through and weeding underneath them. We had a really heavy couple of days of rain, and so a lot of the petals got damaged real bad, so we're going through and snipping those out and making sure to clean up the plants and look forward to that second flush. This is hoop 2, and we're not going to go in hoop 1 because all there is one bed of sweet peas. We've ripped everything else out in prep for fall mums. This row of sweet peas next to me is very similar to that one, so you can look at this. That's what it looks like. And then on either side of it, there are beds of colibri poppies. I think that when we came through in the spring, we had just planted these, so they then were just tiny little plants, and now they're blooming their heads off. We've been cutting on them for a couple of weeks, and hopefully they'll last a little bit longer even though the warm weather is here now. Here in hoop 3 we have more sweet peas, so you can see that they're blooming right now, and then on either side there are Coco Loco roses which have already bloomed out their first bloom, and so we're waiting for them to flush a second time. Something of note in here also are these gigantic poppies that just seed themselves in and we let them go because they're pretty amazing. One, the bees love them. 2, and then we also cut the seed pods and sell those from them. And hoop 4. So this is the final hoop at the house, and there are a couple of rows of roses behind me. Again, they bloomed out pretty early. In fact, some of them were blooming for Mother's Day, and so they're just resting now, waiting for their second flush. And then sweet peas, more sweet peas. On the far side is where ranunculus were, so those have been removed, and now they're going to be replanted with fall mums. This is just like a little micro garden that we have behind our house. It's really well protected, so we have some stuff here that the deer would otherwise really like to find, like a little bit of outdoor sweet peas, which you can see are blooming behind me, and then over on the far side some plugged sunflowers that we put in really early in order to get sunflowers early. So those have been blooming for the last week or so, and we're using those a lot right now. This is field 1. This is almost exactly an acre. It's a little tiny bit more than an acre, and it's almost 100% planted in dahlias. There are like 5 rows of sunflowers and a row of pennycress over there that we got started real early before the dahlias came up, but everything else that you see are dahlias. And killdeer, dahlias and killdeer. There are some dahlias that are starting to bud, like this one right in the foreground. This is Jowie Winnie. She's always one of the very first dahlias to bloom. And then there are a couple of others that are blooming towards the back, so we're just going to kind of walk through the field and give you a quick look. Like I said, the very first dahlias that usually bloom down here are the Jowie Winnies, which are a really nice big ball that we use for a lot of work with our designers, which is it's a beautiful dahlia. And then you can see that almost everything has buds on it. We did have some pretty torrential slug damage down here this spring, and so over to the back side all of these are really behind because maybe 3-4 weeks ago there was nothing here. They were literally eating them down to the mulch base line, and so we had to treat with we treated with Sluggo, and now they are coming back, so that's exciting. All right, so we kind of skipped a little bit there because this field is really long and you don't want to listen to me talk that much, but this is kind of the end of the field 1 dahlias. A lot of really cool dahlias out here and a lot of blooms coming. You can see tons of buds every which way you look, including over here, which is one of my personal favorite dahlias. It has some color on it and it's just starting to get ready to open up. That's peaches and cream. Look how pretty that is. Dahlias in field 2 look a little bit like this. Everything's up, everything's looking really good. We've even got the first of our flowers out here. So Doris Duke is the winner in field 2. Hit my steps. And then you can see almost all of the other dahlias have buds on them and they look really good. We do have some weeding to do, get knock down the thistles a little bit, but overall we're gonna have a lot of dahlias in a couple of weeks. Fast forward a few beds. We're now at kind of the end of field 2, which is annuals from here on out. So we start with some spring annuals, Godetia, and like the stalk that we just pulled the rest of yesterday, and then into the summer annuals, sorry, the Cosmos, Marigolds. We're just starting to cut on, so this is the first succession of them. And then some of the more later summer crops like the Gomphrena. There's asters and strawflower, and then you can see this big row of overwintered feverfew that we've been cutting on for a couple of weeks now. Right next to it is a nice new fresh row of feverfew, so we'll have some of that for later in the summer. And then this is the second succession of a lot of those plants, so more marigolds, more cosmos, more Annie, and then that beautiful rainbow section of amaranth. Isn't it pretty? Past that, all the way to the trees, is the rest, or is actually all of the zinnias. And they're just starting to put buds on and show some color, so it won't be long before we have lots of zinnias too. The backside of field 2 here is Lisianthus. So these are a really long crop. The seeds start like January 1st, and then we put them in, and we wait and we wait and we wait and we wait, and they'll start blooming maybe end of July. So unfortunately, that's a lot of time for the weeds to take over. So those last couple of rows that you can see over there, those are not Lisianthus, those are weeds. The crew is going to come through. They've been doing an awesome job of cleaning out the beds and getting the lizzies nice and freshened, so that hopefully they'll be happy and we'll get nice blooms on them in about a month. All right, so now we're on the back side of field 2 behind the lizzies, and from here back to the greenhouses is all perennials. So lots of cool stuff, lots of cool digitalis, and then there's some Procosmia, which I am seeing that there's a little bit of color on, which is exciting. We use these for flowers, but we also really like to use them for the pods, the seed pods afterwards. There's some artichokes, more digitalis, lots of more digitalis, and then some pretty weedy peonies, and a big patch of artichokes, which we've been cutting off of for probably a month now. We've been eating artichokes and getting lots and lots of artichokes into the markets, so that's been a cool crop. And from here all the way to the greenhouses, there's a couple of rows of perennials here, and then everything else is peonies, which are done for the season. So they're like a really fast and furious kind of crop. They come on and there are tons of them, and then for 2 weeks we do nothing but cut peonies, and then they're over and gone, and now we have to wait all the way until next year to see their pretty faces again. So this is field 3 behind field 2, and from here until way back there, this is all raspberries and thornless blackberries that are planted for foliage and for fruit. And then we have a couple of beds of gladiolas and some overwintered fall mums that we'll be cutting on later. And from here all the way down to the fences, this rainbow beautiful stuff is all celosia. Speaking of those fences, here we are at the fences. This is just a little bit of kind of vertical crop that we're growing. Some hyacinth beans, which have these really pretty dark purple pods, and then these 2 fences have loofahs on them. So we've never grown loofahs before, and we're not in a very hot climate, so I'm not even sure if they're going to do anything. So if you've ever grown loofahs and you have any advice for us, I'm all ears. And past this, all the way out to the end of this kind of dirt looking patch, is all ornamental corn and broom corn for fall displays and fall bouquets. Oh, and a little bit of hibiscus for foliage. This is the main field of squash. So we planted here about a month ago. This is about an acre of squash, ornamental squash and pumpkins, mostly for fall decorative harvest, but also for food. Anyway, you can see they're doing really well, and as we walked through earlier today, we saw some little tiny pumpkins, so they're getting all ready and growing big. So here we are in Crimson, and I talked a little bit about what was in here in the spring. It's obviously grown up a bit. So over to this side are all scented geraniums. A lot of them overwintered, which was really nice. So we plugged in holes, but they are looking huge. And the center row is Sweet Natalie's and Cafe au lait dahlias, which the cafes just started blooming last week. And then right behind me is a row of chrysanthemums, which have gotten there in the spring when we showed you. They were nice and lush and green, and they look pretty ratted right now because we've given them all a haircut, trying to force them back to bloom out in the fall. In clover, you can see that the dahlias are blooming in here. So these are all I don't know, they've been blooming for maybe 2.5 weeks, and we've been cutting on them. And then the tuberose is also up and looking good in here. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get a good crop off of that this year. So now we're between the 2 hoops, and we don't have a lot of protected protected space from the deer. So this is where we plant a lot of stuff that needs to be protected. So we just took out our columbine, which I think was blooming during the spring tour or just starting, and it's done. And we've ripped it out, and we're going to plant something else in there that needs to be protected. We also put in this spring, so these are first-year plants, honey Dijon roses. So they are a little bit short, but they're super pretty. And now I'm in the eucalyptus patch. So I did a video over the winter on how we cut these back really hard to maintain them for cutting, and you can see that they've recovered from being cut back really hard, and there's a lot of eucalyptus out here. So we cut on some of it, but now we're waiting for these really soft tips to harden off before we start cutting on it again really hard. But what a cool crop to have for the spring and the fall. Okay, now we're in field 4. So field 4 wraps around a couple of barns down here, and before it was all in cover crop. So this is the first year that we've done anything in this field. So we cover cropped it over the winter, and now we have tilled it in. We've amended the soil right behind me, and we're going to be planting sunflowers out here for the summer, and then the plan is in the fall we'll be building a couple more greenhouses on this spot. So field 5 is also new for us this year, but we did decide that we were going to plant a substantial crop of ornamental pumpkins over here. So you can see them behind me. I don't know, there's like 18 rows of pumpkins, and then ultimately the plan is to have this transition into a woody field. So there's already some lilacs planted out there, and then we'll be looking at some other shrubs that we'll be planting fall of this year and spring of next year. So here we are in field 6. So in the spring when we brought you out, it was little tiny baby wheat plants, and now look at it, it's just amber waves of grain right over here. It's so pretty. So this is the cover cropped for, hopefully we'll be able to start planting some other crops in it next year. And in the meantime, it's so pretty. Anyway, so thanks for swinging by the farm.